My name is Jeremy Walton, and here's 3 diffusion filters for the red Komodo. Let's go! Diffusion filters are popular for many reasons. I use them all the time. They actually live on my lenses 24/7 except for certain circumstances. I've done other tests with diffusion filters, but I wanted this one to be a bit different when using my red Komodo. People talk about the blooming of the highlights. I've talked about it, but there's a lot more these filters do to an image, like contrast, color, and softness. So this video will cover those features and really give you a side-by-side comparison to see those differences. And yes, at the end of the video, I'll show you the light bulb test for everyone still wanting to see the halation effect. By the way, everything was shot with the red Komodo at 6K RAW MQ. Now, let's get started and see what we're working with. My favorite diffusion filter is the Tiffen black satin filter with a strength of 1. It's just an edgy piece of glass that gives the right amount of contrast and highlight control that I like. I'm not a fan of a super clean look, so this, along with my Komodo, is my favorite combo if I had to pick just one. The strength will also play a role and can depend on your camera and lenses. So far, this strength has been the right amount for my R3 Komodo with the Canon RF glass I use. I can't show you every strength, but based on my test, you can decide if you want to drop down or up in strength. One popular Tiffen diffusion filter is the Black Pro Mist. You can find a lot of information about this one. I like it, but it's not my go-to. I have a strength of 1/4, and sometimes I think it's still a bit much. I use it occasionally on projects to get that specific look. I think 1/8 will serve you better if you want a slight effect. That's up to you though, and you'll see what I mean in a bit. I know this is about the Komodo, but I do use the Black Pro Mist and the Satin filter for photography as well. It's nice to have options, and that's why I own both of these filters. Now for the third filter, and that's going to be the Polar Pro Mist filter, which is also at 1/4 strength. I haven't used this one that much, but thought if I was going to do a test that I needed something different than my usual Tiffen filters. I'll give you my opinions at the end, but the choice is up to you on the look you want to create. These are examples to give you an overall look at some popular diffusion filters. For the first test, we'll be heading over to Minnesota in 15-degree weather, which wasn't the most fun, but having a mixture of textures and snow and a sunset was a great shot for this test. For all the clips we'll be looking at, I tried to keep it simple. White balance, adjusted the exposure a bit with some contrast to not alter the effects of the filter, which would defeat the point of the video. Here's the same image with the Tiffen Black Pro Mist filter. Right away you can see how the contrast was affected. I like to say take the edge off the digital look. It definitely does that, especially within the grass, like a slight haze. And here's a side-by-side comparison with no filter. Everything is still sharp, but does have that dreamier quality, and yes, the highlights do look better, which I'm sure you guessed was going to happen. Now let's throw on the black satin filter and see what's going on. We got the bloom, but much less than the Black Pro Mist, but the contrast is back, and that's why I love this filter. It gives you that film-like quality and keeps that grit to the image that feels more grounded than dreamy. Here's the Black Pro Mist and black satin filter side by side to see what I'm talking about. You can see the contrast difference, and just look at the grass. Taking the highlights out of the equation, you can see these filters do more than bloom highlights. The last filter is the Polar Pro Mist. Having talked about the other filters, we can see this one, for this image, fits somewhere in the middle. It looks like the halation is the same as the Black Pro Mist, but doesn't affect the contrast and shadows as much. This might be something more comparable to the 1/8 strength Black Pro Mist. Having said that, that reminds me to mention, there are a lot of variables to these tests. I use the Canon RF 24-70 f2.8 lens. I could test 1 filter, 1 lens, 3 different cameras, or 1 camera, 1 filter, 3 different lenses, or even 1 lens, 1 filter, different focal lengths. It could get crazy. That's why I'm calling this an overall test to give you an idea of what diffusion filters do. Then it's on you to make a decision. I also used a Polar Pro VND. If you're shooting video outdoors, you'll be using an ND filter. I just made sure it was at the same strength on every filter test. Next up, we're heading to downtown Los Angeles, where it was much warmer out, which made filming a lot better. Here's the shot with no filter. Nothing crushed or clipping, a nice amount of contrast with a mixture of textures. Here's the Black Pro Mist. It's interesting because the blues got a bit warmer and the yellows got cooler. The contrast was lifted, you can see the shadows were bumped, and I do like the softness it creates over the buildings. Just a side note, downtown LA always has a haze over the city. We do get a couple clear days a year, but This wasn't one of those days. Let's look at the black satin filter. In this shot, I see a lot of the same qualities as the Black Pro Mist. I love what it's doing to the buildings in the background, but the contrast is still there. I do see colors being muted a little. You can always add more saturation if you want. Overall, I like what both these filters are doing. If you were wondering, I would record about 20 seconds for each filter, then unscrewed it, slapped on the next filter, and hit record. The sunsets were a little harder to film. This was later in the afternoon, so the sun didn't change too much between shots. The Polar Pro Mist really has a nice effect on the skyline, probably my favorite of the three. Again, I think it falls somewhere between the two Tiffen filters. Let's see the mist against the Black Pro Mist. The mist filter doesn't get as warm and I think is a bit more reminiscent of the original image. Let's have a look at all three. What do you think? Depending on the shot, depending on the time of day, depending on the textures, you can see different results for each diffusion filter. Let's just turn to our left and have a look at the 6th Street Bridge to introduce more texture, and I just thought it was an interesting shot. We even had a train roll by. Overall, I like this shot as is. Let's see what the filters can do. The Black Pro Mist has its usual signs of softness, and in this shot, besides the blacks being lifted, that's the one thing that sticks out the most to me. For what I'm looking at, it's too much and takes away from what I like about the original image. Here's the black satin. Not a lot changes. Compared to the downtown LA shot, even the color is in the same ballpark, and the metal structure to the left is barely affected compared to the original image. The changes I see are in the distance. Everything is subtle. Mist has a similar effect as it did on the LA skyline, which I loved. Not as much here though. I actually preferred the Black Pro Mist over the Mist filter. What do you think? Let's see all 4 shots side by side. One shot, 3 different filters, 3 different features to consider. Now for the next shot, I wanted to go with a more industrial look and shot this around 1:30 p.m. Not my favorite time to film, but in order to see a variety of locations, I thought this would be the best way to do that. Here we go with no filter. We have train tracks, gravel, a lot of metal, and a clear sky. This will get a bit interesting. Here's the Black Pro Mist. I want you to pay attention to the gravel, the sky, and the highlights on the left side of the towers. Let's see that compared to the original. I think this is a real good example of what diffusion filters do besides affecting your highlights. Just look at the color differences and what's happening with the towers. It creates a different look. That can be good or bad depending on what you want. Just be aware. All I did was attach a filter and this is how it's changing the image. What do you think will happen with the black satin? Let's find out. It almost has a stronger effect than the Black Pro Mist, which is the opposite that we found in the other examples. Let's see these two side by side. You can see by the shadows that not much time has passed between swapping the filters. The contrast and color really make a difference. I like to describe the black satin as a gritty, more rough around the edges filter, and now when we're filming something with those qualities, the black satin really stands out. The mist filter affects the towers in a similar way, but doesn't change the color as much as the Black Pro Mist. Look at the difference between the original, Black Pro Mist, and Mist. The Mist keeps a lot of the look of the original while giving similar attributes as the Tiffen filter. Not all diffusion filters are created equal. If you don't know that already, then I hope you can see it in these examples. I love doing tests like this. Filmmakers use cameras, lenses, filters, color, and a whole lot of tools to create different looks, and within each tool there are variables that can change what you want, and even with these 4 clips, you can have a wide variety of outcomes. Okay, let's get to the light bulb test to see what everyone talks about. Here's the Edison bulb, and I have one key light which was set pretty low. I didn't want a completely black background. Pretty standard stuff. Let's just switch to the Black Pro Mist. There you go, a nice halation around the light which really gives a little more life to the shot if you compare it to no filter, which looks a little dull. If we put the Black Pro Mist next to the black satin, yeah, you get something similar but a lot more subtle. And if we put these two next to the mist filter, it has the biggest effect on the light bulb, which is a little interesting since most of the time the Black Pro Mist was doing the most. Let's just throw in the original shot to see everything all at once. There you go if you were wondering what these filters can do and how they handle the highlights. I love using filters. I'm sure this video might be an example of that. I thought it was important to point out some of these differences and show you how much a filter can change your image. And what's really important to know is the filters can behave differently depending on what you're filming, time of day, textures, even how it can handle the highlights, which might be the main reason you're purchasing one. I did mention earlier, there are a lot of variables and I can't cover them all. If you see something you like or you're interested in diffusion filters, then go buy, rent, borrow a filter and do some tests yourself. No one can make that decision but you. I'm just trying to show you what's possible. And go check out all my previous videos on filters. I'm sure you'll get something out of it. Well, there you have it, 3 diffusion filters for the red Komodo. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hit that like button because there's definitely more in the way. Subscribe so you don't miss out. Leave a comment if you have a favorite diffusion filter. Until next time, it's a wrap.